Well, hello. Come on in. Come on in. How's it going? What kind of questions do you have for me today? That's going to be a fun one to answer, especially since the product that I've chosen is prevalent everywhere. I'm going to pick on Samsung Corporation today, just for you, and show you that Samsung Corporation has brilliantly encoded some very elegant esoteric principles just within their name. Yep. So let's take a look, and of course also not just the name, but the actual design of their products, so that if you come and approach it from a Kabbalistic standpoint, every time you pick up your Samsung phone or your tablet and orientate it correctly, you will experience Kabbalah. That's right. So let's take a look and see exactly what Samsung Corporation is up to. Come on, we'll hit the whiteboard first. Okay guys, here we are at the whiteboard, and this is where we're going to break down the cognitive thought form that is Samsung. And like in my other videos, I'll make sure that I have some text here to clarify certain ideas so that you can pause and write things down or do whatever it is you want to do while you're watching it. This way at least I can make sure that I'm presenting this material as clearly as possible so that there would be no misunderstanding. So before we begin though, I think it's really, really important that we take a moment and just discuss perspective. When handling stuff like this in the esoteric, you have to realize this is a kind of a Sherlock Holmesian exercise where you're pooling the vast amount of resources that you may have aggregated as a result of your research and endeavors, and then you're stringing it together mentally or sometimes physically, you know, where you're drawing lines from one place to another so that you can draw and see the connections and visualize those. But objectively, looking at it objectively as if you were just walking off the street, you have every right to say, you know, it's just a name, right? It's Samsung. What's the big deal? It's like Acura or Integra or any of these other company names that really aren't names, right? Well, that's true, and that's absolutely valid. It's entirely valid, and something that you should always keep in consideration when you're doing your esoteric pursuits and trying to suss out what's really going on. Now, with that said, let's take one more step into the land of perspective and consider that in order to see certain things within the esoteric, you quite literally have to maneuver yourself so that you see it just from one line of sight. One of my favorite examples for this comes from the Incredibles movies. The setup for the scene here is that Syndrome has just defeated Mr. Incredible and done his whole monologuing, and Mr. Incredible tries to escape, and he jumps off of that long waterfall and dives into the water, into the underground lagoon, and Syndrome drops a little robot to go chase after him. When he's down there, he sees Gazerbeam, this other guy, he's basically a Cyclops guy, and discovers that there's something in the distance that Gazerbeam was looking at. And then when he moves himself so that he's literally looking line of sight, he can see what it is. This is literally the process of what you do when you are working through the esoteric and relying upon the fact that your perspective involves all the things that you've encountered, studied, and done to this point, and all the things that you might see as a direction or an outlet or outgrowth of that study, and you pull it together so that you can see what's really going on. Let's take a look at the name Samsung as it appears within advertising or within corporate writing. You'll notice that the name Samsung is always in all capital letters. In Admiralty law, this is called Capitis Diminuto Maxima, which means your name is all in capital letters. And it specifically identifies the object in question as a corporate entity, so that it's not really a person, which then leads one to believe that Samsung is a made-up corporate identity as opposed to a surname in Korea. This is further evidenced by the fact that the CEO expressed that in Korean, the idea behind the name Samsung means 3 stars or TriStar, which to me, I immediately, when I read that, I was thinking, wow, TriStar Pictures. I wonder if there's a link or an association. They have a pyramid, a Pegasus, 3 stars. Capitis Diminuto Maxima. What this means is that you are now subject to Admiralty law as a corporate entity. And if you want to learn more about this, because I don't want to kind of weigh this down here, check out my website, Zen Master Hubba Bubba, on YouTube. And the playlist is called The Strawman Illusion, the Foundation for Debt Slavery. When you go through that, you'll learn a great deal. It's a pretty extensive playlist. Which should bring you up to speed on essentially what happened to you immediately following being born and having your name registered on your birth certificate, and why every form of federal or state ID that you receive will always have your name in all capitals. This is to identify you as a corporate entity as opposed to you as a person. All right, so now we know that Samsung is a corporate identity, which means that it gives it the flexibility to incorporate aspects into its name, which would be identifiers to a greater purpose, or facility, or idea, or ideal. Okay? So, in order to understand this, what we're going to have to do is examine certain ideas briefly relative to the Kabbalah and to astro-theological concepts. All right, let's take a moment and look briefly at the Kabbalistic players that we need to be familiar with in order to appreciate the cognitive thought form that is Samsung. Kabbalistically, we have the 2 pillars. We have the pillar of severity, which is headed by Saturn, and we have the pillar of mercy, which is headed by Chokmah. However, remember that Chokmah has a representative in our immediate neighborhood relative to cosmic influence and input and our own particular history. Therefore, the sun stands in as an agent to cosmic chaos, and therefore bears all and is entitled to all the attributes associated with it. What is nice about this is that as you look down the tree on either side, and you see the sun, and then in Chesed we have Jupiter, and then down here in Netzik we have Venus, and then when you look over here under Saturn, we have Gebura, which is Mars, and then down here we have Hod, which is Mercury. You literally get lines of descent relative to planetary bodies and their parental associations, or from whom they sprang, as it were. Both Jupiter and Venus being a product of our interaction with the Sun, and Mars and Mercury being associated with an older time in our solar system, where it was simply Saturn, which was our Sun, okay, known then as Kronos. So associated attributes under Saturn include that it rules hearing and speech. And those, of course, manifest beautifully in Hod under Mercury, who is a god of communications, right? So the names by which Saturn is also known, other than Kronos, begin with the prefix SAM. So Saturday in French is samedi, and Samech and Samael and all these other Sam names, they're all associated with the planet Saturn as an identifier. So when you're watching a movie or you're reading a book and one of the main characters is named Sam, like Samantha Carter in Stargate, you will find that that character is likely a representative of Saturn, or standing in for Saturn in principle. On the other side, we have the sun. The sun rules vision. That's it. That's a lot though, because everything we do today, including the fact that I'm doing a YouTube video, is ruled by vision, because the picture does say 1,000 words. There is so much more that can be conveyed in a singular image than would require perhaps pages and pages in order to adequately describe it in detail and depth, without diminishing the experience or forgetting something that could be even crucial later on, right? As a descriptive. So the sun then is a revelator. It reveals, it shows in the light. And as I said, it rules vision. Knowing these ideas, it's important. Oh, there's one other planet that we should probably talk about. And this is Jupiter. Jupiter is associated as a mediating body within the heavens. And it still functions as that. We owe a debt of gratitude to that big gas giant, because it ensures that our solar system is largely kept orderly and free of random debris, because it kind of vacuums it all up as it engages in its 12-year orbit around the sun. Jupiter has a unique property, however, in terms of an esoteric association, and that is its relationship to Saturn. These three bodies, in fact, form a triumvirate, a trinity, which is repeated regularly. The sun, and we'll just put this down as a nice trinity so you guys can see this. So we have the sun up here, and we have Saturn over here, and Jupiter back over here. Let's take a look at some other names and associations with this relative to various religions. This is Brahma, Saturn, Vishnu, the preserver, Jupiter, and Shiva, the sun, the destroyer. And when you understand the sun's role relative to our early history in humanity, you'll discover that in fact that is a well-deserved name. This is also Apollo and Apollyon, the god of love and music, but also the god of destruction. These three people also represent Pharaoh being the sun, and we know that Pharaoh is the sun because the Pharaoh was the incarnation of the sun, of Re, living in flesh. So he was the morning and the evening star, Re Horikati. He represents the one object that is constant, right, from morning till night, and then which rises again. So this being Pharaoh, we look here at Saturn and we determine Saturn then to be Moses, and Jupiter is likely Aaron. Now, how do we know this? Well, we know this because Moses means drawn from the water. And a deconstruction of what is known as the Tetragrammaton, Yod He, Vav He, Yod He, Vav He, those four characters also are associated with elements. So this would be fire, water, air, and water. Taken as a descriptive of an organizational principle relative to planetary mechanics, you have essentially, in four characters, a description of a confluence or a Birkeland current emerging and creating a sphere of Saturn. Let me show you what I mean. Yod. This is the point at which the Z-pinch takes place within conjoining Birkeland currents. Hey, this is the appearance of water. Vav. the ring, which is also described as a firmament in the heavens, which divided the waters from the waters, and this is He. Water, again. So, Yod, He, Vav, He is a description of the planet Saturn. Beautiful, right? Yeah, it's awesome. This then is associated to Moses, and we can learn that by simply looking at some sculptures relative to the person who is Moses. Almost always you will find that, well, not almost always, but many times you will find that Moses is associated with a bull. And so his sculpture will have bull's horns, little horns emerging from his head. So you can see this is Moses, and he's associated with the bull. The bull being associated with the planet Saturn, and there's multiple levels of association that tie us to that. For instance, the god Moloch. So the god Moloch, who was worshipped in Samaria and throughout the crescent which leads up into Egypt, the area that is now Israel, in fact, and Palestine. This god received sacrifices, wherein the people would give their children and then burn them. Burn them? You're like, wow, you set your kids on fire. Yeah, absolutely. They would burn their children. This was to commemorate a period which the Greeks later teach us was Kronos eating its children. And so you have as a large a brown dwarf flaring when it's in proximity to a more energetic body, which is our sun. And that flaring then is seen as consuming the nearby satellites around that planet, or that star. So Moses is Saturn. Saturn has a brother, which would be Jupiter. Okay? And Jupiter always goes before Moses to speak to Pharaoh. So Jupiter in orbit is the 5th planet, and Saturn is the 6th planet, so therefore it stands before Moses to speak to Pharaoh. Get it? I know, right? It's kind of mind-blowing, but this is what you have to do when you're working with alchemical precepts and concepts that are so beautifully interwoven. It requires a interdisciplinary approach where you're looking at it from science and plasma physics, and you're looking at it from a historical standpoint, and you're looking at it from a scriptural standpoint, and you're looking at it from a mythological standpoint. But this is what kind of fruit that is yielded from this kind of pursuit. All right, so we have 3 players here. We have then Pharaoh, Moses, and Aaron. The reason I point Aaron out is because he stood as a spokesman for Moses. I want you to keep that in mind because that will help us decipher the last component of the cognitive thought form that is Samsung. But I had to get you through all of this so that I could get you to that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have proper foundation and context with which to make your own judgment as to what we're talking about. All right, let's take a look at the word Samsung. Breaking this word down suddenly becomes a bit easier as since you now have information wherewith to look with new eyes, right? You've actually experienced a change in consciousness because I've made you aware of certain ideas and associations so that now when you look at something, if you see me draw a line like this and that, you immediately know that there are associations tied into this word right there in plain sight. S-A-M, Saturn. S-U-N, the sun. The only thing that really is curious is the letter G. What's the letter G about? In order to understand the letter G, let's take a look at it. We have to take a look at some Hebrew again. And we have to use a bit of perspective. Remember in the video Pentagrams, Pentagons, and Perspective, I said that when Captain America looks down on his shirt, like this, and or even if he pulled his shirt out in front of him like that, he would see a pentagram that was orientated point down, meaning that, the point would be towards his back. He would be facing the 2 points at the end. Okay, so he'd be looking at the pentacle of Capricorn or Mars. All right, if people looking at him see a different pentagram or pentacle, they see the pentagram of Venus because they're looking at it and the point is up, just like you see in the U.S. Army, for instance, on the side of their vehicles, or the U.S. Air Force, or various police departments. So with regard to this idea now, this concept of the fact that there are 2 forms of perspective, there's objective where you're just looking at it, and then there's subjective where you become it, right? Or there's also an additional one where you just simply flip things around or flip it over, or you have a mirrored perspective. But usually that mirrored idea simply happens the moment you step inside of whatever you're looking at. So you get inside of Captain America's suit and you look down at your shirt and you're like, oh look, it's the pentacle of Mars or Capricorn, depending upon the context. Since he's a warrior, and Pentagon, our U.S. military structure for the United States of America, is also, it's called the Pentagon, and for good reason, because it's dealing with war, and Mars is, the craft of Mars is war. So the letter G, is not actually a letter G. When you're looking at it, actually, this letter is something else entirely.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
Well, here it's an S.
And what it is the Hebrew character Pe, which looks like this. Like that. Here, take a look at a Freemason symbol for a moment, and you'll see the letter G inside the center of it. See it? Okay. Now, here's an image of the letter Pe. Okay. Now, pretend you're looking at a Freemason's ring, and from the outside, it looks like he's got a square and a compass, or a compass and a square, rather, and in the center is the letter G. And most people believe that that's for Grand Architect or God or Gomorrah, or it's none of that. It's none of that. It's absolutely nothing. The beauty of it is it's so simple. It is the letter Pe. And what the letter Pe means, it is an opening, a mouth. In fact, my snake, which I'll introduce you guys to sometime, her name is Pe, for that very reason, because, you know, she opens her mouth and she eats the little mouse. It also means entrance, or to command, or to speak. Now, to speak. Remember what we talked about with Aaron, but first let's look at that ring. You see it? There it is. So here's the ring, and here's the letter Pe. Now, when you consider what the symbol is in Freemasonry, you have the compass, and then you have the square, and if you take a look at, I have a video, the Seal of Saturn explained it. Here, I'll put the little thing right there and you can take a look at it, and I'll have the link in the comment section, or in the section above that. I go through and show you sacred geometry and explain what this is. and how to create the seal and where it appears, which is everywhere. And in the center we have this letter G. Right? That's that ring. This is actually a sacred opening. And Georgia O'Keeffe would definitely, she'd be all about it. She'd make a flower for it, because this is actually the sacred gate. This is the vulva. This is the opening through which all creation emerges. And we have two of them. Men possess one and women have two. They have one whereby they bear a child. And from a head-on perspective, if you were a doctor, it would look somewhat like that in structure. I don't want to get too explicit. We also have one right here in our voice box. The larynx and voice box open and close just like that, just like this. And it opens and closes and is the point of creation. And perhaps it is the singular point of creation that identifies us most closely with divinity. Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was of God. And these ideas of in the beginning was the Word, which means that sound, that vibration that came forth altered something. And since everything is consciousness, it altered consciousness. As much as this video alters your consciousness by just giving you something new to think about and chew on for a while, that is the power of the vibratory effect of simple speech. It's incredible. There's no way to we can't underscore its importance enough, which is why if you wish to engender real power, true power, and command when you speak, don't lie. Don't do it. You defile your instrument by creating a false cognitive construct. Don't misrepresent, because you're creating something that has a basis of reality only in your mind and not within a collective. There's so much more beauty when you recognize that what you say and what you speak has more importance. You can treat your words as sacred if you want. And certainly what is created from them can be treated that way. Altering and expanding not only your consciousness, but that of other people around you. That's certainly the height that you would wish to aspire for. So this is an opening. This is a box. This is the point at which things are created through speech. So let's take a look at the word Samsung one last time. Okay, we have Saturn, who rules hearing. We have the Sun, which rules vision. And we have G, or Pei, which rules speech. This immediately, when I put this together, brought another image to mind. Take a look at it. Look familiar? Yeah, look again. Yeah, that's pretty funny, right? But there it is. And that same idea is presented here. Hearing, seeing, speaking. What kind of work does Samsung do? It's an audio-visual company. They produce devices for hearing, seeing, and speaking. Telephones, right? That is one heck of an elegant cognitive thought form packaged into a single word, drawing upon multiple aspects in order to verify it, right? You could just outright say it, and there's plenty of guys out there that are just like blah, 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 and they're just saying stuff. But I just gave you the actual connections. These are the reasons why that cognitive thought form is successful. And why that company, in my mind, has presented an elegant presentation of what a cognitive thought form can be. Not to mention they make a pretty good product too. So with that said, why don't we take a look now at Samsung products. Specifically, we can look at my Galaxy Note 5. And we can take a look at it. Remember, as we do, we want to focus on our perspective. And we want to recognize that we are both looking at the phone, and we can also become the phone. All right? I'll see you in just a second. Okay, this is the Galaxy Note 5. When you read the documentation, it describes this component here. This is the front, and this is the back. However, that is from an objective standpoint. From a subjective standpoint, you become the phone. So this is actually the back, or the inside of your head, as it were, and this then is the front looking outward, which is why you get the better camera on this side. But the real way to actually determine if this orientation is in fact correct, and not this way with a little button on this side, right, but it's on the right side here, is a couple reasons, but the easiest is actually you just grab yourself the case that's made by Samsung, and when you put it inside of it, like this, the only way to get it to stand upright by default is this way, which incidentally irritates the crap out of me, because you have to keep your thing down on the volume control. So if you need to turn it down, you can't just do it on the top, you have to do it on the bottom. But again, this is for a reason, because they're adhering to Kabbalistic principles instead of something that might be intuitive. So how do we know that this is Kabbalah? Well, remember that on the right, this is the pillar of severity, and Saturn deals with stopping things. This is the no hand, and on the left, this is the pillar of mercy. This is the go hand. This is where the force of the cosmic force is pumping into the universe, and this is where it stops. So when you want to use your phone, the areas which are easiest to access immediately are on the left. So the power button is up here and it's off and slightly to the left. But the volume up button is actually right here. So the volume up button, let's see here, is right here. So if I want to turn the volume up like this, if I turn the volume down, you can see that turns it down. And when I turn it this way, pressing the button here, it turns it up. So on the right is down, which is no. That's suppression of energy, in this case, suppression of sound. And on the left is go, pushing it up. So the sound goes up. So right here you can see they have a little mini tree of life, where this is your little mini pillar of mercy from a subjective standpoint, looking out this way. Okay, if you were doing it objectively, then you would see that the pillar of mercy, which is the go button, is then on the left over here, and on the right is the pillar of severity. But we're becoming subjective. We're looking at it as if we were the phone, looking out on the world with our one good eye, and the pillar of mercy then is on the left. That's go, and the pillar of severity is on the right. And of course, the thing which closes and exits you out of all of your application then is also on the right. So there you are. From top to bottom, start to finish, Samsung is observing Kabbalistic principles and making it work, whether we like it or not. I do enjoy their phone, although I gotta say I sure wish the volume was on the top instead of the bottom when you put it inside of their little Samsung case, like this. So, alright, that's it. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist. I'll be talking to you later.